Welcome to the product tutorials on how are expense settings used in Replicon. I'm now logged in into the Replicon instance. In this demo, I would explain how you make changes to the expense settings and how those changes are effective in the Replicon instance. In order to access expense settings, go to Administration and click on Expense Settings available under Expenses. Let us look at all these settings one by one. The first setting is for the due dates. The email notifications that you configure in the system are based out on the due dates. The configuration or the time period for the due date is decided in each setting. That is, for timesheet it's decided in the timesheet settings, for time off in the time off settings, and for expenses in the expense settings. As you can see here, the email notification that will be sent out for expense approvals are due will have the due date one day after the expense is submitted. In the similar way, expense approval are overdue will be sent out or has the due date one day after the expense approvals are due. Let's look at how these due dates affect the email notifications. Go to Administration and click on Email Notifications available under the Notification System. You would see expense approvals are due and expense approvals are overdue notifications available right here. Click on Expense Approvals are due and you would see the option Send Message decided on the due date. These due dates are decided based on the configuration that you have done in the expense settings. That is, this notification will be sent out one day after the expense has been submitted. Say if you would like the email notification to be sent out 2 days after the expense has been submitted, then you can click on the drop down and choose one day after the due date. Now since our due date is set to one day after the expense has been submitted, the email notification will go out after one day of the due date. In the similar way, you can configure the email notification for expense approvals are overdue. When you click on those, you will have the same section which says Send Message, and you can decide when would you like the email notification to be sent out. This is how due date affects the Replicon instance. Going back to expense settings, the next section is the expense notice. You can configure a notice here that will be displayed on the expense sheet. If you would like the users to accept the notice before the expense sheet is submitted, then you should go ahead to the expense template and check the option of notice acceptance is required. However, before you do that, make sure that this notice here is configured with the data. You can also include notice when you're printing the expense sheets. The next section here are called custom fields or user-defined fields. You can create more than 5 custom fields here. Click on Unused, click to add, provide a name, and choose the type. Based on the type, you would see the next field populating. For text, it is maximum length. For number, it will be minimum value and maximum value. For drop down, it would just be the default value. And for date, it will be to and from. Let's create a drop down user defined field. In order to add the options here, write down the option and click on the add button. Once you have added the option, go to default and choose if you want to have a default value. You can choose whether this field should be required, if it should be enabled or disabled, or if it should be hidden. Once you're done with all these changes, click on the Save button. Once the user-defined field has been saved, you would see it available under this table. Now go to Administration and click on Expense columns available under Expenses. The expense column would then show you the field here, which is the user-defined field that you just created. It is important that you have this field checked for that to be available within your expense sheet. Now let's go to an expense sheet. Click on My Rep and go to Expenses. click on Add Expense. You would see the user-defined field available here with the default value populated automatically. These are about the expense settings in Replicon and what changes with the expense settings within the Replicon instance. Thank you for watching the video. Did you know that you can now get in touch with Replicon using the Replicon Community? In order to access the Replicon Community, go to the Replicon website and click on Customer Zone available at the top. Click on Community available here, and you would be taken to the Replicon Community page. You can now sign in or register and post any questions, queries, ideas, or report any issues, and one of our product management team members or a Replicon representative will get in touch with you immediately.